بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome everyone to another session here with Fath Rahmani fi Tafsir al-Quran by the great Mujiruddin al-Ulaymi rahimahullah ta'ala. This evening we will be looking at the explanation of Surat al-Shams and Surat al-Layl, insha'Allah, picking up from where we left off, having concluded Surat al-Balad last week. So to jump right into this, Surat al-Shams, we've discussed some of the virtue of this particular chapter in the past as it relates to the oft recited chapters recommended by the Prophet ﷺ. This is one of them. Recitation of Ash-Shams and Wal-Duha, وَالشَّمْسِ وَالضُّحَاهَا, this particular chapter, as well as others, has been recommended by the Prophet ﷺ in Salat al-Isha. This is from the hadith of Jabir radiyallahu anhum ajma'een. You can find this in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. The Prophet ﷺ instructed Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu, who was leading the prayer, very lengthy prayer. And as a result of that, there was a complaint. Somebody ended up actually leaving the prayer to make it on their own, because it was just too long. And so the Prophet ﷺ heard of this and he said to Mu'adh, why didn't you pray with Sabbih isma rabbika al-a'la, which is Surah al-A'la, we've talked about already. And why didn't you pray with wash-shamsi wa-duhaha? And also indicating the next chapter, al-Layl. So here you can see, we've talked about this at least a handful of times so far. When it comes to selecting chapters to read as the Imam would lead a congregation, then there's some recommendations. And those recommendations are based on consideration of everyone behind you. While you might be really into it and you have the time, and you want to lead and you want to pray a very long prayer, that's fine, so long as you're leading people that also are of the same condition. In the event that you're not, the people behind you, they have work, they have responsibilities, they may have to get somewhere, they have things to handle, they're expecting to be led in a prayer which is moderate in length, and each prayer has its recommended chapters. And so Salat al-Isha, like Salat al-Dhuhr and Salat al-Asr, the recommended chapters to read within those first two rak'ahs of them are from Surah al-Naba to and including Surah al-Layl. So you would select two chapters from that grouping to read, one in the first and one in the second, preferably one longer in the first chapter than one shorter than the first chapter you read in the second rak'ah. That's the fiqh of the prayer as it pertains to the selection of Ash-Shams. So here you can see the Prophet ﷺ mentioning it explicitly, Surah Ash-Shams. So Imam al-Ulaymi rahimahullah ta'ala says it is Meccan, meaning it was revealed in Mecca, consisting of 15 verses, 249 letters, making up 54 words. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We begin in the name of Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, which translates as by the sun. And this is an oath. We've been looking at this waw al-qasam quite a bit in these shorter chapters. وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, by the sun and its brightness, meaning its light when it shines. And so the term here, al-duha, with a dhamma on the dad, and it's a short vowel, means when the sun shines and is full in its light. And then he points out here another related word. It's almost from the same word, duha, but this time with a fatha on the dad and an elongated vowel, dhaha. Here it refers to the period after that until the sun reaches the zenith, meaning directly overhead, dividing that period of time from the sun rising until it gets to its highest peak in the sky. Al-duha here, according to Imam al-Layl, refers to the point where it comes up and begins to shine until it is full, illuminating. And then it continues in its height until it reaches its peak. And so this is what is being referred to here in the opening words, وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا. The next verse says, وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. This means, and by the moon, when it follows it. Now, meaning it follows it by rising as the sun sets. Meaning the moon rises as the sun sets. Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu said the moon follows the day. One of the other great scholars of the early generation, Qatada, said that when it follows it, وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا, it's referring to the night of the hilal, meaning the new crescent moon. When the sun goes down, the hilal is visible. And this is something that we've become accustomed to when looking for the hilal of the new month, right? So when do you get to see that? You have to wait until Maghrib time. And as the sun begins to set, dip below the horizon, that is when you can see the new moon. That is the time of sighting the new moon. And you have a window of time. It could be a couple minutes up to 15 or perhaps 20 minutes until the moon will also set below the horizon. So it's not that you could just go out and see the new moon any time of night or any time of day. That's the time, and so that's what some of the greats of the past understood it to mean as well. So again, we are looking at وَالْقَمَرِ إِذَا تَلَاهَا. And by, we're swearing, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing by the moon when it follows it. Remember, when we're having this series of the waw al-qasam, the swearing of sorts by these creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then there's going to be the thing for which He is swearing for. And that's going to come up shortly. He says, وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا. And by the day when it displays it. Here, وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا جَلَّاهَا, meaning it reveals the darkness, eradicates the darkness. And as Imam al-Layl, he says, this is kind of a metaphor for something which is not mentioned, but it's something that is well known. So the waw al-qasam here for the oath, and the rest are all atfun alayha, basically meaning they're all connected to one another. These types of oaths, they're all attached one to the other. So here when we say, and by the day when it displays it, or when it illuminates, jallaha. So when it illuminates, this is similar to when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى, okay, which is going to come up shortly. By the day as it is illuminated, or it illuminates. So you get in a kind of a similarity here with this verse and a verse that's coming up in the next chapter. After that he says, وَالْلَيْلِ إِذَا يَغْشَاهَا, and by the night when it covers it. Meaning the night when it covers the sun. When the sun sets, causing the horizons to be dark. Okay, he says, وَالسَّمَاءِ وَمَا بَنَاهَا in the next verse, and by the sky and who constructed it. وَالسَّمَاءِ, we know the word sama, وَالسَّمَاءِ, and by the sky, وَمَا بَنَاهَا. Here, according to Imam al-Layl, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says ma, it actually means who constructed it, as opposed to what we would typically understand being what. We would typically understand that to mean what, but here it means who, referring to the one who created the heavens. The meaning has also been reported to have meant a description. It's used in descriptive purposes, meaning by the heaven and its construction. وَمَا بَنَاهَا. Right? It's itself and its construction. So it's either the one who created it, and this is what the opinion of Imam al-Layl was, rahimahullah ta'ala, and others have reported from Qatada that it means by the heaven and its construction. The next verse reads, وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا, and by the earth and he who spread it, meaning who laid it out. It's become widespread, the nature of the earth. And this was the view of Mujahid, Qatada, al-Dhahak, Suddi, al-Thawri, Abu Salih, Ibn Zayd. They all viewed that it meant وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا طَحَاهَا. طَحَاهَا means that it's been spread out and made vast. Ibn Abbas said, وَمَا طَحَاهَا, this means what he created in the earth, meaning and by the earth and what was created in it. Ali ibn Abi Talha reported from Ibn Abbas that he said, طَحَاهَا means that he proportioned it, meaning by the earth and its proportion. So you have various different views here that you can see. You note that from Fath Rahman, our author and Shaykh gives us one view, which he viewed to be the strongest of those. And there's nothing wrong with the multitude of views here. They don't appear to be contradictory one to the other. However, when you're looking at introductory or beginner level works like Fath Rahman, he's going to give you by and large one view so that you can begin with one thing and then build upon that as you delve into more intermediate level works. The next verse says, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and by the nafs and he who proportioned it. وَمَا, again, has that وَمَا بَنَاهَا, referring to who as opposed to what. Here the same thing applies. وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and he who proportioned it. And by the nafs and he who proportioned it, meaning he balanced, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala balanced its creation, the creation of the nafs. And when he says وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, meaning it sounds like it says, and by the nafs one, it's referring to all nufus. That's the Arabic language sometimes. You mention the singular, وَيُرَادُ بِهِ الْجَمْعِ. But what's really intended is the plural. Okay, so the Arabic language is used in that way sometimes. And when the term is being used indefinitely, this is an emphasis on multitude, meaning it actually doesn't just mean one, but it emphasizes many. So we're talking about all nufus, which is the plural of nafs. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and by the nafs and he who proportioned it. Others have added that they have been created upon the fitra. They have been created in a sound manner. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, and by the nafs and sawaha, meaning it's been proportioned or it's been created sound, and that has to refer to the fitra, which we can find in the Quran. There's a verse in the Quran that explicitly refers to this, and then there are of course some hadith that the Prophet ﷺ addresses this. One of those, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَأَقِمْ وَجْهَكَ لِلدِّينِ حَنِيفًا فِطْرَةَ اللَّهِ الَّتِي فَطَرَ النَّاسَ عَلَيْهَا لَا تَبْدِيلَ لِخَلْقِ اللَّهِ. So this means set your face towards the religion. Hanif. We know Hanif is the upright religion. Allah's fitra with which He has created mankind. No change let there be in the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the Prophet ﷺ was also narrated to have addressed this in both Al-Bukhari and Muslim. He said, كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ, that every child is born upon al-fitra. So here this is a kind of the natural disposition that they've been created with. فَأَبَوَاهُ, his parents, يُهَوِّدَانِهِ أو يُنَصِّرَانِهِ أو يُمَجِّسَانِهِ, they turn him into a Jew or a Christian or a Majusi, a Zoroastrian. كَمَا تُولَدُ الْبَهِيمَةُ بَهِيمَةً جَمْعًا. So it just as an animal is born complete with all of its parts. هَلْ تُحِسُّونَ فِيهَا min jad'a, he says. Do you notice any mutilation in that animal? Like splitting of the ears or branding or things of that nature, cutting of the tail? Those things happen afterwards. Typically, when you come into possession of a beast, they would brand the animals, or they would put a marking on them, put a ring on them, such that it would be known that that was the possession of so-and-so. So you wouldn't find those markings or mutilations when the animal was born. So essentially saying that when you run into somebody of Fitra, they've been marked or mutilated or branded by some other creature. Okay? So that's important to take note of. And there's another narration from the Prophet ﷺ. He says, يقول الله عز وجل إني خلقت عبادي حنفاء فجاءتهم الشياطين فاجتالتهم عن دينهم. He says, Allah the Mighty and Majestic says, verily I created my servants hunafa. Hunafa means they were believers in one God. But the shayateen, they came and distracted them, led them astray from their religion. So here, this is as I said, this is an additional understanding. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا, by the nafs, and he proportioned it, created it in balance, or created it in a sound manner upon the fitrah. The next verse, it reads, فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, and inspired it with its wickedness and its righteousness. Meaning that he made it understand, we're talking about the nafs, فَأَلْهَمَهَا, النَّفْس فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, he made it understand its good and its evil, and gave it the strength to acquire both wickedness and righteousness. There's a propensity, or there's an ability, a capacity for man to go either way, one way or the other, to go good or to go evil. And with that capacity, the next verse helps us understand what the best way is. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, he has succeeded who purifies it. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. And this is what Imam al-Ulaymi points out as a jawab al-qasam. So remember we were saying by وَالشَّمْسِ وَضُحَاهَا, by the sun and when it illuminates, etc. We were taking, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was taking all of these oaths or these vows with the creation in order to emphasize a point, which is قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Allah is saying, I swear by the sun, I swear by the moon, I swear by the etc., etc., that he has succeeded who purifies it. Meaning, he has attained his goal. Who purifies it, the nafs. Cleanses it, purifying the nafs through obedience. You purify your nafs through obedience. It seems simple. And it doesn't need to be overly complicated. It doesn't need to be complicated. We don't need to complicate this. How you purify the nafs. It's not meant to be rocket science, out of reach from the everyday Muslim, that you could attain success in the hereafter. Okay? Jannah is not reserved for the spiritually elite. It's certainly, I should say, not reserved exclusively for the spiritually elite. The spiritual masters, of course it's reserved for the spiritual masters, but it doesn't mean that it can't be obtained by the everyday Muslim. How do you do that? Through obedience. Simple. When it's time to pray, what do you think you got to do? Pray. You don't got to overthink it. It's time to fast. What do? You fast. It's time to pay zakat. What do? You pay zakat. You're obliged to make hajj. What do? You make hajj. That's it. Through obedience. And that doesn't just mean the things that you do, but it also means the things that you don't do. The things that you refrain from and abstain from. Okay, so those are the sins that you stay away from. That's how a person purifies their nafs. Qatada, he said that he cleanses it from the lowly and despicable characteristics. So this is something that many of the early generations understood from this verse. قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا, that he has succeeded who has purified it, purified the nafs, and how to go about doing that. The next verse reads, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا, and he has failed who instills it. Meaning, when he fails, he has lost. And who instills it means hides and disgraces it with wickedness and sin. So we can understand, the basic grasp of this concept is you purify it through obedience, and you soil and disgrace it, the nafs, through sin. Again, simple. Easy concepts. Easy things to understand. Everyone can understand that. You don't have to be Shaykh al-Islam to understand this. You just have to be your everyday Muslim to understand the good and the evil. What happens when you do good and what happens when you do evil. Okay, he says, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا, and he has failed who instills it, meaning disgraces it with wickedness and sins. It's also been explained to mean that he makes it dull, dasaha, and he disregards it by neglecting to allow it to receive guidance. Neglecting the soul by preventing it from receiving guidance. And treats his nafs in this manner until he begins to act on that due to that negligence. Because receiving guidance, allowing guidance to enter into your nafs, is what brings light into your life. And preventing that guidance is what brings about darkness. And it's in that darkness that a person would perform acts of disobedience. They turn away from the obedience of Allah and they begin to act out on their desires and sinful ways. Ibn Abbas, he said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to stop whenever he recited this verse. وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. He would stop here and he would pray. اللهم آتِ نفسي تقواها أنت وليها ومولاها وخير من زكاها. Oh Allah, give my nafs taqwaha, the taqwa. Anta waliyuha wa mawlaha. You are the guardian and master and the best. Wa khayru man zakah, and the best to purify it. It's another hadith Imam Ahmad recorded that Zayd ibn Arqam said the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would say, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min al-ajzi wal-kasali wal-harami wal-jubni wal-bukhli wa adhab al-qabr. So first he starts by seeking refuge. He says, Oh Allah, I seek refuge with you from weakness, one second. From weakness, from laziness, from senility, meaning of old age, from cowardliness, stinginess, and the torment of the grave. Allahumma ati nafsi taqwaha wa zakkiha anta khayru man zakkaha anta waliyuha wa mawlaha. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min qalbin la yakhsha' wa min nafsin la tashba' وَإِلْمٍ لَا يَنْفَعْ وَدَعْوَةٍ لَا يُسْتَجَابُ لَهَا. Then he began, and he continued, O Allah, verily I seek refuge with you from a heart that is not humble, a soul that is not satisfied, knowledge that does not benefit, and a supplication that is not answered. But in there he also says the same thing, Allahumma ati nafsi taqwaha. Oh Allah, I give my nafs the taqwa and purify it, for you are the best of purifiers. You are the master and the guardian. So here you can see, again, this is found in there's other hadith Muslim narrates as well, similar to this prayer the Prophet ﷺ himself would make in terms of purifying the nafs. Okay, general ideas and concepts. Next, it gets specific. It says, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it says, كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِطَغْوَاهَا. Thamud denied by reason of their transgression. كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِطَغْوَاهَا. Denied. كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ. They denied their messengers. That's what's meant here. They denied their messengers by reason of their transgression. And this was due to their arrogance. So after mentioning the failure of those who corrupt themselves, Allah mentions a group that acted similarly so that others may take heed and avoid their actions. And the people of Thamud, they're the people of Salih. That was the Prophet ﷺ. So if you think about this in the context of Meccan society, okay, you have a general concept, if you will, being delivered by the Prophet ﷺ via the Prophet ﷺ, Allah's words about obtaining success through purifying the nafs, and then the opposite of that, destruction by way of sin and disobedience. And then, after giving a general concept, a specific example. We have to have a specific example so we can see what they did and what their outcome of that was. All right? So it's not just a concept anymore. It's a practical example. You have to understand that Salih was from the Arab prophets. And who were we talking to initially? The Quraysh. And they, the people of Thamud, they were idolaters, rejected their prophet. What were the people of Mecca? Idolaters. And what were they doing to the Prophet ﷺ? Rejecting him. So the Arab, they had prophets, and we know the ones that we know of. Among them was Salih. There was Hud, Shu'aib, and Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So, and they knew as well because there was still a trace of their past existence. Madain Salih is still there in Saudi Arabia, where they used to reside. It's where they would carve homes into the mountains. So that's something that was there and witnessed that, look, the people that were able to do this because the Quraysh, they lived in what? Crude homes, or Bedouins that lived in tents. They weren't carving towns into mountains. That's something that was beyond their capacity, right? So they're seeing a magnificent people no longer there, just vanished, gone, destroyed. So the idea is delivering the concept along with an example. The outcome is, if you continue down the route of Thamud, the people of Thamud, then the outcome will be the same. Could be the same. So that's the idea. That's why Thamud is mentioned here. كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ بِطَغْوَاهَا. Thamud denied by reason of their transgression. The next verse reads, إِذَا انْبَعَثَ أَشْقَاهَا. When the most wretched of them was sent forth. And we're still talking about this story here. When the most wretched of them, meaning the one who made haste to harm the She-Camel. This is, of course, the story of Salih and what happened during his time and how they rejected him and rejected his signs. He was sent forth. The most wretched of the people, Qudar ibn Salih was his name. And he was one of the leaders of his people, an idolater. it was said he was very strong, such that he could not be defeated. He was like an invincible warrior, if you will. And he was the one that went forward and with the backing of his people and ended up harming and killing the she-camel. فَقَالَ لَهُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ نَاقَةَ اللَّهِ وَسُقْيَاهَا. So the Messenger of Allah said to them, the she-camel of Allah and its drink, its drinking source. So the Messenger of Allah, this is referring to Salih alayhi salam, said to them, the she-camel of Allah, and this of course is a warning to them. فَقَالَ لَهُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ نَاقَةَ اللَّهِ. It's نَاقَةَ اللَّهِ with a fatha there as a warning to them, as opposed to saying فَقَالَ لَهُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ نَاقَةُ اللَّهِ. It's نَاقَةَ اللَّهِ as a warning to them and its drink. Meaning, beware of harming the she-camel and preventing it from its drink, otherwise you will be punished. فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَعَقَرُوهَا فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا. But they denied him and hamstrung her, the camel. So their Lord brought down upon them destruction for their sin and made it equal upon all of them. So here, but they denied him, meaning they denied his command, Salih, and hamstrung her, the camel. And that's how they killed the camel. So there's some specifics not mentioned in the Quran, but mentioned by the Imams of the Tafsir, etc. The details of how Qudar ibn Salih killed the she-camel. You find this in the Tafsir and various explanations. So essentially, what he did was as it says, he hamstrung the camel, meaning he cut the forelegs, the hamstrings of the camel such that it fell down. It couldn't hold itself up, and then drove his sword into the camel, killing it. And of course, that was a very vile and offensive way to deny a sign that was requested by those people themselves. The camel was the result of them needing a sign from Salih. And basically, they wanted him to produce a sign. And that's what happens is the people, they come, and this, like they did with the Prophet ﷺ on multiple occasions, produce a sign, show us a miracle, validate yourself and your claims. And then the sign is produced by Allah's decree, and those that have covers on their hearts, it could be as plain as a camel coming out of a rock. Because that's what this sign was. It was the divine sign that they disregarded. And the way that they killed it was particularly brutal. And it was symbolic of their disbelief. It violated the covenant they had with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the Prophet Salih. And this is what led to their ultimate retribution. And so you'll find that this story is mentioned in several places. The incident is mentioned in Surah Al-A'raf. This is chapter 7, verse number 77, what means, then they hamstrung the she-camel and defied their Lord's command, saying to Salih, bring us what you threaten us with if you are truly one of the messengers. They wanted the sign, he shows them the sign. Don't harm the camel. Don't interrupt his drinking. Otherwise, there'll be a negative outcome. So what they do, they killed the camel. Not just killed it like you would slaughter the camel, but they mutilated the camel, tortured it, and then killed it. Like, bring the punishment, basically, is what they're saying. Go ahead. Do your worst. Okay, and then of course this verse here in Surah Al-Shams. And so the verses in regards to this particular portion of the story highlight the defiance and the arrogance of Qudar and Ibn Salih and his followers, the fellow conspirators, which led to the ultimate punishment of the people. And so Allah mentioned the denial here in the verse. If we take a look, فَكَذَّبُوهُ First they denied. فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَعَقَرُوهَا. They denied first. He mentions the denial first, and then the hamstringing, because their denial was a cause of them killing the camel. That's how it goes. Denial, and then there's action. So what you might understand as well, and the phrase "and hamstrung her" implies that the hamstringer was one, as they all, or I should say that they were all together. It was a collective. If we look at the verse again here, a note from this story, because this is a big part of the chapter. Number one, Thamud, the tribe, they were an Arabian tribe. They were known for being advanced, having an advanced civilization with these monumental rock carvings. They lived in the region known as al-Hijr, still present today. Now you can still visit and you can see the signs of their dwellings. Salih was sent by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as a prophet to guide the people of Thamud and preach Tawheed like the prophets and messengers that came before, urging the people of Thamud to abandon idolatry and to abandon and forego the immoral behavior and practices that they had become accustomed to. Then there was the miracle of the She-Camel. This was sent to prove his prophethood as one of Allah's signs. The power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Salih, he prayed for a miracle. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala produced this miraculous She-Camel from a solid rock, meaning the camel wasn't born of other camels. It just came into existence, showing the magnificence and the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The camel was extraordinary because of that. And as a means of distinguishing it, it's referred to Naqatullah, the camel or the She-Camel of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so because of that, the people of Thamud, they were commanded to respect the camel, allow it to graze freely and eat wherever the animals ate, and to drink from their water sources on certain days. So it was like the camel has this day and then you have that day. The camel has a day. It goes to drink unhindered by anybody. Let the camel drink, then the next day you can drink and water your animals, etc. And then the camel has another day. So there were days that were set up for this. And this is like a means by which they could surrender, submit, and obey Allah. Sami'na wa ta'na. Right? If you think about the nature of the verse, فَكَذَّبُوهُ فَعَقَرُوهَا, they denied and then they killed the animal, hamstrung the animal. If they would have first believed and then let the animal drink, it would have been they let the animal drink on those designated days because of their iman. Whereas they did the opposite. Because they denied, they ended up killing. Again, it takes the denial and then there's the action. Whereas to surrender to this designation of watering, etc., there would have to be some iman. And that's what it takes to be obedient. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. So what we were talking about before, the simple concept of how do you purify the soul? Well, if it's time for prayer, then you pray. If it's time to fast, then you fast. If it's time to pay zakat, then you pay zakat. The question will be, well, why are people not doing that? The iman. The iman is not there. Right? So that is kind of like the jumping point. The iman is not there. Why am I not doing this? You have to acknowledge. I have weak iman. My iman needs to be strengthened. And then, of course, after that, the outcome was divine retribution. So Salih, he warned the people of Thamud that there would be impending divine punishment for their heinous act, meaning the way they treated that sign, the She-Camel. And then, despite that warning, they were, of course, defiant and disobedient. It said that after a period of 3 days, as Salih indicated, a catastrophic event struck the people of Thamud. There was an earthquake accompanied by a loud thunderous blast which destroyed all of them, leaving only Salih and a few believers unharmed. And so this account in the Quran serves as a lesson of morality and the consequences of disobedience. And while it also underscores the importance of iman, of obedience, and the dire consequences of arrogance and defiance. So while we're looking at this in the context of the Prophet's life, ﷺ, with the Quraysh, understanding the similarities between Thamud, the people of Thamud, and the Kuffar al-Quraysh, Salih as the Prophet and Messenger presenting miracles, and the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ doing the same for his people and being denied, both of them rejected. We're seeing one disastrous outcome due to that denial and rejection and disbelief, and a threat to the people of the Quraysh. If they continue to deny, there could be a similar outcome. While we're looking at it through that lens at Mecca, guess what else we have to look at? We have to look at us. Because it's not just an isolated only with the prophets and their immediate audience. It's a concept that's applicable to everyone throughout time. We have to think, why are we facing such dire consequences? Why are we facing such dire situations? Whatever that may be. And there's plenty to go around today. There's plenty to go around. One question we have to ask ourselves is it because of disobedience? Is it because of arrogance? Is it because of defiance? And we have to take a good long look at ourselves, at our own nafs and the collective, the nufus, to understand the way out. Remember, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. That successful are those who purify it. Again, you can see that this particular story of Thamud is recounted in numerous chapters. Surat al-A'raf, that's chapter 7, from verses 37 to 79. Surat Hud, that's chapter 11, verses 61 to 68. Surat Shu'ara, chapter 26, verses 141 to 159. So here you have three places besides this chapter, so 4 in total, recounting parts of this story, which should emphasize to us the significance of the lessons that can be learned from it. And this is one of the primary lessons that we should walk away with. So it continues and says, so their Lord brought down upon them destruction. So their Lord brought down upon them destruction. He says, فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا. Meaning, he destroyed them with punishment for their sin. بِذَنْبِهِمْ. See, there we go, back to what I was hinting at before. The hardships, the difficulties, the dire straits, all of that, it could be very much because al-dhunub. They were destroyed because of their sins and made it equal upon all of them. فَسَوَّاهَا فَدَمْدَمَ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّهُمْ بِذَنْبِهِمْ فَسَوَّاهَا. Here, because of that, the nature of the sins, as retribution for it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made it equal upon all of them, meaning the punishment encompassed everyone, such that none escaped. None escaped that punishment. And this is something that we've discussed in the past, that there will be a point, especially when you begin to see that none are enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. That's become a thing of the past, a thing long forgotten. That destruction will be sent, and it will encompass everybody, the sinner and the saint alike. The sinner for their sins, and the saint for not trying to rectify and purify the people that they live with. And so they will be almost guilty with that situation, almost like a complicity of sorts. He made the punishment encompass all of them, such that none escaped. وَلَا يَخَافُ عُقْبَاهَا. And he does not fear its consequences, meaning Allah. the consequences of that punishment, of that destruction. There is no retribution against Allah for his actions. لا يسأل عما يفعل وهم يسألون. So you can find in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not asked of what he does, but it is they who will be questioned. Ibn Abbas, he said that Allah does not fear any consequences from anyone else. Meaning Allah can just take out the whole people and there would be no one that could criticize or say otherwise. Wallahu a'lam. That's the conclusion of Surah Al-Shams. The next chapter, Surah Al-Layl. Surah Al-Layl, of course, means the night. We've already talked about it being from those oft-recited chapters of the Quran along with Al-Shams. The Prophet ﷺ mentioned that as well. Imam Mujiruddin, he begins looking at this chapter as he does typically. He says here that it's Meccan in nature, though some have said, وَقِيلَ Madaniyah, it's revealed in Medina. And it has been said that it has some verses from Medina. This is Makkiyah. Okay, that's the first full stop. It has 21 verses. It's letters, 300 letters, and its words, 71 words. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We begin, of course, in the name of Allah. Ar-Rahmanir Rahim. Wal-Layli idha yaghsha. So it means by the night as it covers, meaning it covers the earth. Wal-Layli idha yaghsha. Again, you see the waw al-qasam. Okay. This means the night when it covers the earth and everything with it by way of its darkness. وَالنَّهَارِ إِذَا تَجَلَّى. Again, that was brought up before in the past. And by the day as it appears, meaning it appears, the daytime appears and illuminates the horizons with its light and its radiance. So basically the sun eradicates the darkness of light. وَمَا خَلَقَ الذَّكَرَ وَالْأُنثَى. He says, and by he who created, again, وَمَا خَلَقَ, we're talking about ma means who, and who created the male and the female. The male and the female, Mujiruddin says, it means Adam and Hawa. So before we go further, draw your attention to this. وَاللَّيْلِ وَالنَّهَارِ. وَاللَّيْل وَالنَّهَارِ. الذَّكَرْ وَالْأُنثَى. What are we looking at so far? There you go. Opposites. Similar to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَخَلَقْنَاكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا. We have created you in pairs. وَمِن كُلِّ شَيْءٍ خَلَقْنَا الزَّوْجَيْنِ. And everything we have created pairs. And just like these things are being sworn by their opposites, also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala points out opposing things here, leading into إِنَّ سَعْيَكُمْ لَشَتَّى. So this is Jawab al-Qasam. I swear by the wal-layli, I swear by the night, I swear by the day, I swear by he who created man and woman, swearing by opposites, that your efforts are diverse. Inna sa'yakum lashatta. Indeed, your efforts are diverse. Meaning, the deeds that you do are diverse in nature. Some are for the pleasure of Allah, and some gain His displeasure. Meaning, some are good, and some are evil. Opposites. Okay? فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى. He goes on in the next verse. So as for he who gives and fears Allah, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to divide and show us what the good looks like and what the evil looks like. He says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى. So he who gives, meaning gives the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Meaning he gives what he's been commanded to give, وَاتَّقَى. And then he fears, he has taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in all of his affairs, in everything that he does. وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى. And believes in al-husna. According to Mujiruddin, that means kalimat al-tawheed. Al-husna is la ilaha illallah. So a person believes in la ilaha illallah. Some say that al-husna means the reward of those good deeds. It means the reward of the good deeds, and that would be in the hereafter. فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. Allah says we will make, what means we will ease him toward ease. وَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ, meaning the one that أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى, the one who gives and the one who fears, the one who believes in the best. he says, here it is. He says, أَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى وَاتَّقَى وَصَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. We will ease him toward ease. Meaning we will prepare for him righteous deeds, which is obedience. You'll be given success. You'll be given tawfiq. You'll be given the ability and the capacity. Be blessed to perform righteous deeds. وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ وَاسْتَغْنَى. He says, but as for he who is stingy and self-sufficient, again, we're looking at opposites, okay? You have to keep that in mind. This is one of the beauties of this chapter. If you think about, I don't want to harp on this too much, but there are, people that like really get into, look at how amazing and beautiful because of this, the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is presenting these opposites. Yeah, that's true. This is very beautiful. It's very eloquent. It's very poetic in nature, and that shouldn't be lost on us when we understand, what's being said here. وَأَمَّا مَنْ بَخِلَ وَاسْتَغْنَى. So the first one was وَأَمَّا مَنْ أَعْطَى, the one who gives. Now we're talking about the one who's stingy, meaning they don't spend in ways of obedience. وَاسْتَغْنَى, they see themselves self-sufficient with the pleasures of this world over the bliss of the hereafter. Ibn Abbas said this means he's stingy with his wealth and considers himself to be in no need of his Lord, the mighty and majestic. وَكَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى. So the first one was صَدَّقَ بِالْحُسْنَى. Now we're talking about denial of the best, meaning كَلِمَةُ التَّوْحِيد, according to Majruddin, that they deny La ilaha illallah. And if we went with the other explanation, meaning they deny the reward of their good deeds in the hereafter. And we understand that the people of the Quraysh, that was one of their hang-ups that they had, was the denial of the hereafter. كَذَّبَ بِالْحُسْنَى. They denied the hereafter and its reward. They said, it's nothing but the life of this world. We live and we die. That's it. فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى. We will ease him toward difficulty. So it was, what was before that? فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْيُسْرَى. And the opposite of yusr is al-usr, again, going with that opposites being presented here. فَسَنُيَسِّرُهُ لِلْعُسْرَى. We will ease him toward difficulty, meaning we will prepare him for a deed that necessitates hell. And it's called al-usr because it leads to hardship. Those deeds which necessitate the hellfire, they're burdens, they're hardships. Okay? And there are many verses that have this kind of meaning. And of course, this proves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards those who intend good with success. They have good in their heart. Their inclination is towards goodness. Allah will grant them success. And whoever intends evil, they'll be left to that evil. And it is all in accordance with the qadr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He says, وَمَا يُغْنِي عَنْهُ مَالُهُ إِذَا تَرَدَّى. And his wealth will not benefit him when he falls down. Meaning the wealth that he was stingy with. Referring back to that previous verse. The wealth which he was stingy with, that will not benefit him when he falls down, meaning when he falls into hell. Inna alayna lal huda, Allah says, what means indeed upon us is guidance, meaning explaining the path of guidance as well as misguidance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made clear what righteousness is and what disobedience is. And we've talked about this quite some time ago. التحسين والتقبيح. The concept of defining what is morally sound and what is immoral. التحسين والتقبيح. Defining what is moral and what is immoral. Inna alayna lal huda. Indeed upon us is guidance, meaning Allah is the one that defines what is moral and what is immoral. Not us. Right? The scholars of the madhab, they say that التحسين والتقبيح شرعيان. That the definition of morality and immorality is based on legal code. Legal code is revealed law. It's not aqliyan. Just logic and rationale. Some scholars, they've said it's both, this or the other. However, according to al-Ashab, it's shar'iyan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the sole legislator who defines what is moral and immoral. So there's no one that could come and redefine that. There's no code of conduct, constitution, amendments, votes on laws, and etc. to the end of that that's going to come and redefine what's good and what's bad. It doesn't matter how many people say, this is good now. This thing, eat it up, yum yum. Swallow this. Wait, I'll pour it down your throat. Let me just cram it right into your life. It's not going to change what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has set as being moral and immoral. Inna alayna lal-huda. He says, indeed upon us is guidance, meaning explaining the path of guidance and misguidance. If that were the case, if it were the case that man could define morality and immorality, we would not need revelation. Allah would just have created us, and they're gonna go. They'll figure it out. It's gonna come to them. I've instilled it in them. They're gonna know it, and then they'll act on it or they won't. But no, He sent messengers. He sent all of these messengers and prophets throughout the history of mankind and revealed Scripture so that man could be guided and understand what's moral and what's immoral, what's good, what's bad, what the consequences of those things are, and that each person will earn what is decreed for them. It says, وَإِنَّ لَنَا لَلْآخِرَةَ وَالْأُولَى. And indeed to us belongs the hereafter and the life of this world. So we give in both worlds what we will to whom we will. And we can understand from this verse that both the hereafter and this world belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He's in complete control of them. It says, فَأَنذَرْتُكُمْ نَارًا تَلَظَّى. So I have warned you of a fire which is blazing. I have warned you, فَأَنذَرْتُكُمْ. He's talking to the people of Mecca specifically, of a fire which is blazing. It's intense. It was reported that the Prophet ﷺ was heard giving a sermon in which he says, أَنذَرْتُكُمُ النَّارِ. I have warned you of fire. And he said it in such a voice that if a man was in the marketplace, he could hear it from where the narrator was standing now. He said it with such force that the garment that was on his shoulder, the Prophet ﷺ had a garment on his shoulder. He said this, أَنذَرْتُكُمُ النَّارِ. I have warned you of a fire. He said it with such force that that garment fell off of his shoulder down to his feet. Also reported by Imam Ahmad, the Prophet ﷺ, he says, إِنَّ أَحْوَنُ أَهْلِ النَّارِ عَذَابًا يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ رَجُلٌ تُوضَعُ فِي أَخْمَصِ قَدَمَيْهِ جَمْرَتَانِ يَغْلِي مِنْهُمَا دِمَاغُهُ. And so this is talking about a person in the hereafter is considered to be punished in the slightest of ways, such that the coals, if you will, of the hellfire are placed under his feet, or have two sandals with straps that will be made of fire, and this will cause his brain to boil, just as a cauldron boils. And that person will not think that there's anyone receiving a more severe torment than him, even though he will be receiving the lightest punishment. Meaning, the person that's receiving that torment will think there's nothing worse than this. This is the worst torment that a person could experience, when in reality that is the very lightest punishment. وَلِيَعُوذُ بِاللَّهِ. فَأَنذَرْتُكُمْ نَارًا تَلَظَّى. He says, so I have warned you of a fire which is blazing. The lightest of that, causing the brain to boil. لَا يَصْلَهَا إِلَّا الْأَشْقَى. None will burn therein except the most wretched. Allah then explains who they are, saying, الَّذِي كَذَّبَ وَتَوَلَّى. Those who denied, meaning they denied the Prophet ﷺ and turned away. They turned away from Iman. And there's a specific reference here in Meccan society, Abu Jahl and Umayyah ibn Khalaf. as Imam Mujiruddin mentions. وَسَيُجَنَّبُهَا الْأَتْقَى. But the most righteous will be spared from it. Okay, so again, we're looking at the opposites of these situations here. Those who denied faith, we got two examples, and those who embraced faith. The people of piety, they will avoid, if you will, or be spared from that fire. And Allah explains that, الَّذِي يُؤْتِي مَالَهُ يَتَزَكَّى, who gives his wealth to purify himself. They seek to be pure in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the specific reference is Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhu. وَمَا لِأَحَدٍ عِنْدَهُ مِنْ نِعْمَةٍ تُجْزَى, and no one has with him any favor to be rewarded. It was narrated that Umayyah ibn Khalaf, during the intense heat of midday, during that time would lay Bilal on his back on scorching rock of Mecca. Of course, we understand the nature of, if you visited Mecca, you understand how intense that would be. So he would lay him down on the rock. We've had some hot days recently. I mean, we've been in the 90s. Imagine being laid down in the middle of the day on like black asphalt. So that's where you're at. And then put large rocks on your chest. It's like you're in the fryer, you're in the squeeze. And he would say, you're going to stay like this until you die, or until you renounce Muhammad, until you reject. The Prophet ﷺ and Bilal, of course, would respond saying, Al-Ahad, Al-Ahad, the one, meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu said to Umayyah, fear Allah regarding Bilal. And he replied, he said, you're the one who corrupted him. Remember, Abu Bakr was very active on the dawah scene. Abu Bakr was there giving dawah, calling people, inviting them to Islam. He says, you corrupted him, so save him from this situation he's in. And so Abu Bakr as-Siddiq bought Bilal and freed him. And the disbelievers, they said, he only did that because of a favor he owed him. Because he wants to have a favor. And so, of course, this verse was revealed in refutation of that. There's no favor to be compensated for. إِلَّا بَتِغَاءَ وَجْهِ رَبِّهِ الْأَعْلَى, but only seeking the countenance of his Lord the Most High. Or also meaning hoping to attain the blessing of seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the final abode in the gardens of paradise. وَلَسَوْفَ يَرْضَى, and he will surely be pleased with what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives him in the hereafter as a reward. And this is a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. And so while these are specific references in terms of people, Abu Jahl and Umayyah ibn Khalaf and Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, they're specific according to Mujiruddin. They can also be understood in a very general manner, such that the qualities, these are qualities that a person could possess in order to see either outcome of good or evil. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam, wa sallallahu wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen wa jazakum Allahu khayra.